When I first started this series, I told you there were two basic ways to get your dog into the send. The first one we talked about was the straight into the line, send into the send, where we talked about getting your dog up to speed to build momentum, to avoid anything that might kill that speed and momentum, and finally to release your dog, have your dog become independent from you, moving ahead, to release them while you're still in motion. That would maximize all the cues telling your dog to go forward ahead of you. Now the lateral distance entry to the send is very similar. You're doing all those same things, getting up to speed, independence and all that, but you're sending your dog to a jump at the beginning of the send going in one direction, or maybe it could be the jump before the send, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to establish lateral distance. Now lateral distance is, well, you can see it right here. Your dog is parallel to you running and you're 10, 20 feet away. Question is, how do you get your dog out there so you're then at lateral distance? Well, as you can see from the chart, as your dog gains independence going away from you to that first jump, you're kind of turning to the side. And when they make their turn, then you're parallel at lateral distance. Now, this doesn't apply just to fast, this is to distance in general. We'll talk about that at other places, but keep in mind, you get yourself a turning jump to send your dog to, and while they're focused going that direction, independent, focused going away from you, you turn, and when they turn, then you're at parallel distance. That is one way to work distance, or at least what I call lateral distance. Now, one of the things that can go wrong is that your dog has peripheral vision and your dog might see you turning to the side, which is not the direction that they're going in. So since you're going a different direction, emotion is the strongest cue, it's possible the dog might decide, well, mom is going that way, I'm going to go that way. So what can you do to avoid that? And one answer to that is a move called the lateral send. Now the lateral send is an idea that I got from this book here. Look, this is a very famous book. This is Linda Mecklenburg's Developing Handling Skills, one of the great early books in agility. And although it is really more oriented toward the high-end handlers and not the audience I'm speaking to, in some cases I was able to take those concepts and kind of water them down for we mere mortals, the people without the perfectly trained dogs. So this is kind of my interpretation of her idea of the lateral send. I've never heard anybody else ever talk about this move, but it's such a great one in so many ways. And I'm going to actually do a separate lesson on the lateral send, but we're doing a limited one here just for purposes of getting the send in fast. Okay, well, this is what the lateral send is as the dog is going away from you, you are cueing in every way possible except for the motion away from the dog. So you're keeping your shoulders pointed to it and you're saying go and you're having your arms go while you're kind of creeping over this way. So the dog has some cues, not 100% cues, but some cues to keep going ahead. Now, I've gone in the backyard, I put my hat on, and I filmed my dogs, both of my dogs, two very different dogs doing this move and showing you what it's about. I'm going to reuse this tape in my general lateral send lesson, but let's take a look at it now. We'll come back and show how it applies in fast. This is the lateral send. Notice how as the dog goes to the second jump, I'm veering away from that line of jumps. Here it is again with an arrow. That was Anna, my older, slower dog. And here's Poochie, my younger, higher drive little poodle. And once again, here's the arrow. I'm veering away from the line of jumps as she's taken the second jump. Okay, to give you an idea of what I'm doing here, let me give you a walkthrough and talk you through it. So I'm walking and I'm veering away from the line of jumps. However, as shown in the freeze frame, I am physically turning my shoulders toward the second jump as I'm veering away. I can also say that my arm is pointed, and at the same normal time as I would be saying go and giving my jump cues, I'm doing it at the same time. However, I'm still kind of veering away, but everything else is saying take that second jump. Now, to give you some perspective on what is happening here, let's go back to the ordinary course of cueing a turning jump. I like to say that for average handlers, it's always a good idea to totally cue a jump until the dog is committed, which means your shoulders are pointed that way, you're moving in that direction, your arm and voice, everything is telling the dog to take that jump. So we could just say that's 100% of what you're doing is saying take that jump. And if you turn a little bit early, like this, you see I turned too early before the dog was committed, and Anna followed me and missed the jump because I cued too early. And here's the same thing with Poochie, as I turned a little bit too early, and she followed me because I didn't cue until the dog was committed to the jump. Now, just to fill on the whole picture, let me just show you the dog, me cueing the commitment and them taking the jump. Here's Anna, and we're going to call that a score of 100%, because 100% of what I am doing is cueing the dog to take the jump. Here's Anna, and here's Poochie, where we also get a 100% score of what we're doing to cue the jump. Now, here's the reason for the lateral sin. Okay, so sometimes you want to get ahead of your dog. In fact, a lot of times you want to get ahead of your dog. So what can you do to peel away from the dog early to help you get ahead of your dog? To say, in this particular case, you want to do like a landing side blind cross on the other side of that, a third jump. But you need to peel away earlier and not go all the way till the dog is committed. And that's what the lateral send is for. Now, we talked about that 100% score just a second ago, and let's ask the question. Now, you know your dog more than me, of course. Do you need 100% of the cues to get your dog there? Now, would 80% or 75% of the cues be enough to get your dog there, considering their obstacle focus and their momentum, you know what you know about your dog? And although that 75 or 80% is it's a purely random number I'm pulling out, it's just to symbolize that you're not fully cueing it, but it might just be enough to get the dog to do it. So let's go back to my walkthrough in the freeze frame, and you can see that my shoulders are pointed toward the jump, and my voice and motion, everything is the same. I'm still cueing the jump in every way, except I'm not totally moving toward that jump, but I'm not totally moving away from it either. Now, look at this right here. Like when you turn away too early and the dog follows you, you would give that a score of 0%, because nothing you are doing at that point is telling the dog to take the jump. Well, when your shoulders are pointed and your voice and everything else is kind of telling the dog to go there, although you're not moving totally away from it, we're going to call that 75-80%. And that might be enough to get the dog over the jump. Now, I can't tell you how your dog is going to be, and the only way you can figure this out is to go out and practice it and try this out. So what you're doing is you're going out there, you set it up like I have it right there. You take a jump, try to veer away and turn your shoulders and still tell them to take the jump, and that way you might be able to get, a half a second or a second ahead, or 8 or 10 or 12 feet ahead of your dog, which may make a difference for you. I know sometimes a half a second will help you get there to do something you want to do. So that's the lateral send. And remember, you're kind of like supporting your dog going in a different direction than you're purely going. Okay, now that you've seen that, do I even really need to explain how that applies to sending your dog into the send? I think it's pretty obvious, but let's just do a little comparison. First, here's the chart we're using in the examples. You want the dog to go forward, but you want to move to the side. So you're cueing your dog to go forward while you move into the side. Okay, so here's an example from fast. This is the one we've been using from the beginning. You want your dog to go forward more or less, and you're moving to the side. So you use your lateral send cues to cue your dog to keep going forward while you're moving to the side. Okay? It's just a little extra cueing more. I like to say cue more, right? You're cueing more to keep your dog going where you want it to go. And you're trying to counteract the fact that you're not using to the maximum extent your forward motion, and motion is the strongest cue. It doesn't really need to go out and practice and see what you can get out of your dog. Some dogs it might work with, some dogs might help them go like an extra 5 or 6 feet. It's just something more to add to your cueing to get your dog to go out further away from you. This is not just for fast. This is for any time you want to establish lateral distance. For example, you have a big line that jumps out here and you want to get over here for whatever reason. You have to find yourself a turning jump, a jump to send the dog to. Use the same kind of maneuver so they're out there, then you're running parallel to them. Like not just in fast, but in your handling when you want to get distance in general. Now, here's another example of how this would look. Sometimes you're not really going in straight into the sin, you're going in an angle. Angle is better because the direction you're moving away from your dog, away from the line of the dog, is not as drastic. So therefore, you're not pulling, your motion is not showing as drastic a deviation from their path. Here's an example right here. You've seen something like this one, where you have to make your turn because you've come to the line. So your dog is going in at an angle, and you're sending him in. You have to turn because you can't cross the line, but you're using your lateral send cues to keep your dog keep going in the direction you want to. Okay? I think that's it. Now that you've got your dog out there, all you got to do now is keep your dog out there. And that will be the subject of our next lesson.